Welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi. Kruse. Coming up on the show today, we'll talk a little bit about the results of last night's primary election, especially for those of you who did not join us on our live election night special. How dare you? But we're here for you anyway. Also coming up, Seattle's mayor's office at least, wanted to use fewer white officers in their recruitment material, which is obviously just blatantly racist, but also ridiculous because the department can't afford to be picky no matter who wants the jobs. And later on, an unbelievable post from an activist group that is seeking to keep homeless people in incredibly dangerous encampments, which is just indicative of the fact that they don't actually care about the homeless people who they are claiming to protest in support of. And also, you will not believe the rent control meeting in the city of Seattle. Socialist Councilmember Shama Sawant wanted to enact rent control before she leaves office. Thankfully, it failed, but I have got to play you some of the clips of members of the public who testified in support of that policy. All of that coming up. But first, if you have not become an Undivided subscriber already, please do so. It helps support this mission and this movement to give common sense a comeback. And it's just $5 a month. Best investment a person could make. I think Nicole will agree. All right, so last night we did an election night special to talk about some of the most relevant races that are happening across the state. Not every county had things on their ballot, so you might not have gotten a ballot if you were in one of those counties. But of course, the Seattle City Council races, I think, are among the most critical. We were really looking for incumbents to perform poorly or to be rejected by their constituents, because in Seattle, the three incumbents who are running for their jobs again have been incredibly detrimental to public safety. They have failed on so many fronts. The city is much worse off now than it was 5 years ago, especially 10 years ago. And I'll say there are some kind of good things and bad things that came out of the Seattle City Council races. I want to focus in particular on two that we've talked a lot about. The most important one being the race for the council seat that represents downtown Seattle, because that's where the bulk of the issues are, right? That's where the crime is bad. That's where the drug crisis and homelessness really impacts the city in a profound way, because that's supposed to be the heart of the city. And the heart of the city is not doing well right now. So Andrew Lewis is the incumbent. Unfortunately, for Seattle and for the rest of the state of Washington, that is impacted negatively by the crazy stuff Seattle decides to do. Andrew Lewis does appear to be headed toward the general election. He came out of the primary, and there's going to still be some additional ballot drops from now until the results are finalized, but he's got a pretty comfortable lead at 40.9% of the vote. And in second place is U.S. Navy veteran Bob Kettle with about 33% of the vote. Now, even though Andrew Lewis is advancing to the general election, 40% is a terrible showing for an incumbent. And so you have 60% of voters who came out in his district who don't want him to keep his job. So that's not a good place for Andrew Lewis to be. I would have loved to move past the primary without him even going to the general election, but that is not going to be the case. Also, Olga Sagan, who we've had on the show many times, she performed at 14%. I'm a little surprised by that, although I know she had some stumbles on the campaign trail and the business community didn't really get behind her. And then Aaron Marshall, a Seattle police officer who is running, has 7% of the vote. So Andrew Lewis, I'm sure you will see more campaign mailers and videos from him trying to rewrite history on what he has done or not done in the interest of public safety. But when it comes to both Andrew Lewis and Bob Kettle, both of them, I thought, had deeply dishonest ads that they sent out. Andrew Lewis saying that he's led the way on public safety, which is a joke. And Bob Kettle, who I haven't, we tried to get on the show, haven't been able to yet, so I don't know much about him as a person in terms of his ability to communicate his message, but he put out a flyer basically calling two of his other challengers Trumpers, which is ridiculous and absurd, and so I don't like that either. So, but he's not Andrew Lewis, so in that sense, he has something going for him. But yeah, Andrew Lewis should be very fearful for his job. And then in terms of the incumbent that's running for their seat again, that I think has the most fringe politics, that would be Councilwoman Tammy Morales, who represents the area in South Seattle. So not only the area around the stadium, so SoDo, but the Chinatown International District, and also some of the areas in South Seattle that have the most amount of shootings, which she doesn't seem to care about. So Tammy Morales is, and this isn't a surprise, but because there was only 3 people in this race and 2 of them seemed like more serious contenders. So Tammy Morales ahead in the field after the initial ballot drops last night. She's got 48% of the vote, followed by Tanya Wu, who has 45% of the vote. And Tanya Wu is sort of the more, well, not sort of, she is the more common sense candidate. She's the candidate who has gotten, I think, more support from the business community. And so we'll see what happens there. But again, any time as an incumbent that you're under 50%, that's not an ideal place to be. That means the majority of people voting in your district don't want you to keep your seat anymore. So Tammy Morales, who has supported everything from police defunding to something we'll discuss momentarily, efforts to pass rent control legislation in Seattle, getting her off the city council would be a really good step toward just getting off the ideologues and putting people on the council who can at least work toward consensus and welcome disagreement, which is something that Tammy Morales simply is not capable of doing. One other race we did not talk about, well, actually, let's first talk about education quickly. We just wanted to tick through some things that we've talked at length on the show about. If you were watching the live show last night, you know that our friend Talana Reed, so Talana Reed was an activist, an anti-cop activist appointed to the Olympia School Board, which is already a district that is a poster child nationally for public education gone wrong. And she was appointed to the position on the school board despite being caught on video, basically telling people to go tear up the city, to protest the police, wild stuff. So anyway, she was appointed to a position that was vacant. Now she's running for position 1 on the school board, and blessed be thy name, she is in 3rd place, and hopefully she stays there. Maria Flores is the incumbent. I don't think Maria Flores should keep her job either, because the entire Olympia School Board just needs to be wiped clean. But I think I'd rather have Maria Flores than Talana Reed, for sure. So that's good news. Andrew Flojo in 2nd place with 27% of the vote. Maria Flores, 48% of the vote. Also on the education front, we didn't talk about this at all last night, Nicole, and I had kind of forgotten about it, to be honest, but Semi Bird, who is a candidate for governor in Washington State, a Republican candidate, but he's also a member of the Richland, Washington School Board. He and 2 other members are being recalled. And we'll talk about the reasoning there. But in the latest results, all 3 of the members who are being recalled, those recalls are succeeding. So Nicole, if you can pull up that graphic for us. So for position 3, position 4, and position 1, all 3 of those members are being recalled. And Semi Bird has said that that doesn't impact at all the race for governor, that he's still going to do that. So my understanding of the situation in Richland is that this had to do with mask mandates, which is really strange to me.
It's really strange to me because these 3 voted to defy the mask mandate.
Yeah.
And in that county, in that city,
That's
surprised.
what's weird to me. So. I'm surprised they're being recalled successfully for defying something that we all know made no sense.
Right.
And maybe it's just sort of like, if you're going to blatantly defy sort of a government edict, should you be in that sort of position? But
it's bizarre to me. I think the voter turnout, and if you're on the team that wants to get somebody out, you're going to show up, and maybe you don't if you're, supportive of that. So I don't know. Voter turnout, man. Yeah. It's disappointing.
And it says, so a successful recall does not preclude a school board member from running for office again. So you could get ousted. You could decide to run for your position again if you wanted to. It said each of these 3 members, this is from the Tri-City Herald, each of the 3 who voted for lifting the mandate faced 3 recall charges by a citizens group. They accused Byrd, Byard, and Williams of violating Washington's Open Public Meetings Act. So there's a little bit more to it, by taking final action on a matter not included on a published meeting agenda. And I take those sorts of things seriously. Sure. I mean, open government's very important. So the argument being that they went forward with this without following the Public Meeting Act, violating state law on masking at the time, exceeding their powers and responsibilities as school board members, and violating district policies and procedures by failing to assure compliance with laws and policies. So that's an interesting thing, especially considering he's running for governor. I don't think that would have a very big effect on his campaign for governor, considering he's a Republican. Most Republicans in the state, I mean, I'm guessing most, think that the mask mandates were a little bit ridiculous. However, like I said, not supporting the mask mandate is a different thing from violating, a law around public meetings. So right. I don't know if voters were able to differentiate those 3.
in his own
district, Richland,
then yikes.
Yeah, that's not good. So I would also be remiss if I did not point out that voter turnout was very low, which we expect in off-year primary elections, but it's still disappointing because, I mean, in Seattle, you have an opportunity to reshape City Hall and to put the city back on the right path. And in King County, the voter turnout's 19.15%. Which is just like, man. And then you wonder, like Nicole said, who's making the decisions on these races, you know? It's the people who are super motivated in one way or the other. And I think that's part of the reason why folks in the middle are often just left out, you know, because they're like going about their lives and maybe they're not as hyper focused on these things. Then you've got the fringes that are just eager beavers to vote for whatever reason. It's got to change. Absolutely has to change. I wonder how much different Seattle would be if the vast majority of people showed up to vote every election. All right, this story, I was going to talk about it yesterday, but I was like, let's just stick to election stuff. So Seattle has had this ongoing effort to recruit more officers, which is an uphill battle. I mean, Seattle is down 500, 600 officers. They are well below the place that they need to be for a city that size. They are struggling to keep up minimum staffing requirements. They are struggling to be able to respond to urgent 911 calls. It's a serious public safety emergency. And I don't blame people for not wanting to be cops in the city of Seattle. So one, right now they're stretched thin. And so I imagine there's some officers trying to look at greener pastures and trying to leave actively. But you have a city that at least for the last 3-4 years, you've been working for people on the Seattle City Council who have vilified you publicly, who have said they're going to defund your jobs by 50%. Who have scared away the city's first black female police chief, someone who is incredibly qualified for the job. A city that allowed an entire police precinct to be taken over by activists, and then city government not only catered to them, but showed up on the protest lines with them. I mean, wild stuff. So it's not a surprise to anyone that nobody wants to be a cop in Seattle. Well, not nobody, but very few people, not enough people. And Washington as a whole has the lowest number of police capatas of any state in the nation. There's a reason for that. The political climate has a lot to do with it. So I guess I wasn't surprised, but I continued to be just deeply disappointed with some of the narrative around the recruiting effort with SPD. So our friend Jason Rantz published an article. The headline is, Mayor's Office Demanded Fewer White Men Military in Seattle Police Recruitment. So he got his hands from a source on a memo talking about their ongoing recruitment efforts. And, you know, I think everything that happens under Mayor Bruce Harrell's watch is ultimately his fault. That's part of wanting to be a leader. And I think that he recognizes that. But this seemed like something a staffer had put together. So they're talking about like material for recruitment videos, recruitment flyers, anything that you're using to try to lure people to apply to be Seattle police officers. And it was talking about what we need more of in this material, what we need less of. Here's what they said they need less of. Officers with a military bearing, which a lot of people who used to be in the military go on to some sort of law enforcement career because it's kind of a natural fit. I have to laugh though, like what's a military bearing? Is it like fewer officers with a high top haircut? Like fewer officers with a high top haircut in recruitment material. It said fewer officers who are white and male. Okay, so that's racist. Fewer officers who are in leadership. So I guess maybe they want more sort of rank and file type, and that's who they want to appeal to. But this is absurd for a variety of reasons. One, you know, you hear this phrase over and over about how Seattle's police department or any police department should reflect the community it serves. And I think that's important. I think that is a good idea to make sure that you have a police department that's diverse in life experience, diverse in different kinds of races and genders, etc. I think it's important for a police department to reflect the community it serves. I have no problem with that. But Seattle is pretty white. Seattle's a pretty white place. And so, you know, if you have a police department that reflects the community and you're putting a high focus on the racial aspect of that, then yeah, your police department is going to be a majority white. But beyond that, the obvious problem with this is Seattle can't afford to be picky. You can't afford to turn away someone because they're white, because they're a dude, because they have a military bearing. You can't find people who want to work for you. So you're going to go out in this recruitment material and try to appeal to potential, Black recruits, Hispanic recruits, females, members of the LGBTQ community, immigrants, whatever it is. Fine. I have no issue with that. But you can't afford to say no to any qualified applicants, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their gender. So it's just patently absurd. But I also think, and the publishing of this, and they've since, I think internally, as Jason Rance reported, there was a lot of pushback about this from members of SPD and from SPD officers who are working on this recruitment and retention plan to say, hey, like, why would you put that in writing? Why would you even include that in here? It's offensive to officers who are white, who are out there doing difficult work, who served our country in the military. And now they're seeing that the mayor's office wants to use fewer of them in recruitment material as if they're not doing a good job, as if they're not worthy of being celebrated and put forth as good examples of law enforcement officers. So the whole thing is just ridiculous. And again, it sounds like the mayor himself perhaps wasn't directly involved in the crafting of that particular memo, but the mayor is responsible for what happens under his leadership. So again, you're just hurting yourselves more, you're hurting the department more by putting forth these surface level things to try to recruit additional officers. It's not going to help you recruit additional officers. It's going to alienate the officers that you've already got. And again, I go back to, you can't afford to say no to people who are qualified. Even if you got a recruitment class and it's 100% white men who used to be in the military, you probably should take it. You probably should accept every single one of them with overwhelming gratitude and just be happy that someone wants to be a cop in your city. Absolutely ridiculous, just ridiculous. Okay, coming up next, there was a vote in the Seattle City Council pushed by Socialist Councilmember Shama Sawant to pass rent control. It failed, thankfully, but first of all, you should have extreme gratitude for the fact that I went through this meeting and listened to public testimony so you didn't have to. And I picked out only the best gems, and I'm going to play them for you coming up next. But first, an opportunity to save a little bit of money. If you're feeling the pinch of high gas prices, if you're feeling the pinch of the new long-term care tax, do the First Mark Challenge. Mike and I did it a few months ago. I hear from so many people who do the challenge, and they have just as good of insurance as they had before, or even better, and they're saving money. We spoke to a woman who saved $100 a month, $1,200 a year to help offset some of these other additional costs that you're facing. So the First Mark Challenge basically entails you taking just a little bit of time to do a Zoom, to go through all your current insurance with them, talk to them about your insurance needs, and then they'll go out for free, no cost to you, and shop the market. Here's Dave Taylor. He's the CEO of First Mark.
The First Mark Challenge, it's simple. From a consumer standpoint, right? It's simple, it's free, it doesn't take very much time, and it's going to help you feel confident about your coverage, one way or another. And you said earlier, low pressure, we are no pressure, right? At the end of the day, when we get done and we look at that spreadsheet, we're going to tell you, you're going to see the facts in front of you. It's going to be real obvious to you what the right decision is. But our job is to make recommendations. It's our client's job to decide, and we're going to support them whichever way they go.
Yeah, and again, you never pay First Mark anything. So you could have your own insurance broker. You don't pay them anything. You can end up saving a bunch of money. So to me, especially if you're looking for ways to help with your budget, this is a no-brainer. It just takes a little bit of time. FirstMarkInsurance.com. FirstMarkInsurance.com. They work for you. All right, the following segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Seattle City Councilwoman Shama Sawant is not running for her seat again, and that means that this is her final year on the Seattle City Council. What a blessing. What a hashtag blessing. But one of my concerns about her leaving is what she would try to push through before she leaves. You know, Shama Sawant is the longest serving member right now on the Seattle City Council. She has really formed this intense following of activists in the city who will show up to council meetings in person in the middle of the day, who will testify on behalf of her policies. And I think it gives a false impression for the Seattle City Council that more people support her policies than actually do, because those are the people who show up in the middle of the day and who are able to dedicate time to do this. So I was happy yesterday to see that Shama Sawant's latest effort to make it more difficult to be a landlord in the city of Seattle failed. It's important to know rent control is not allowed under state law right now. So this would be sort of a vote from the council to say, hey, we want this, and to put pressure on Democrats in Olympia to make it possible. So Kshama Sawant put this forth. It ended up failing, but the vote didn't happen until a lot of Kshama Sawant supporters had their 1 minute of fame or whatever it was to speak during public testimony. And I'm going to play a couple different types of testimony for you. First, I'm going to play some of the activists who showed up in favor of rent control. And then I want to play some comments from a small landlord, because you're going to see sort of the dichotomy here of people who were for this policy and people who were against it. But let's start with the pro-rent control activists.
Hi there, my name is Kat. I'm a student, and as someone who has to pay rent every month, I've got a few questions for everybody here today. Why is it so difficult to pass a bill that would protect the working class members of our population, who you claim to stand for? Why do you stand idly by as those who have plenty continue to extort those who have so little?
Voting no on this legislation is siding with corporate greedy landlords and against working people.
They're happy to sell out working people, low-income people, poor families, especially those who are Black, brown, Indigenous, queer. What do we want? Rent control! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Rent control! When do we want it? Now!
Councilmember Juarez, if you're tired of listening to us, just vote yes.
That's right.
And you don't even have the spine to stand up to these corporate landlords. Shame on you.
And it sounds like every landlord who spoke probably paints over mold. All of the costs to even get an apartment are so ridiculous. First, last, and then a deposit. Landlords are even scamming people and charging people $300 for an application fee, and then and people don't even get the place. This is just so ridiculous. It is absurd. And if you can't do your civic duty, you shouldn't have this job. Pick a different job. I give up the rest of my time.
Well, your time was over, so that's very generous of you. But when I listen to that, comments about, I have to put a deposit down to rent this place. Like, how dare you? How dare you have any sort of requirements for me to be able to live in your apartment or me to be able to live in the home that you're renting out? And it really comes across as this sort of hissy fit where they're screaming at the council members, chanting in council chambers. And, part of the whole characterization of, every landlord is bad. Every landlord is this big conglomerate that is only out there to make us suffer and to cost us a roof over our head it's absurd. And there are plenty of small landlords in Seattle who, over the past 3 years in particular, have tried to speak out for themselves. During some of the policies during the pandemic that made it very, very difficult for small landlords to make a living because people didn't have to pay rent. They didn't even have to prove that they had some sort of financial strain that would lead to them needing to have a break on rent. And the difficulty in trying to evict people who, by any reasonable standard, need to be evicted. And so for small landlords to be painted with this broad brush and lumped in with major corporations and bad landlords is just absurd. And I want to give you a good example of that. So these activists are speaking and they're vilifying landlords. And there is a woman who, again, she comes forth and she's very reasonable. She's very practical. She's just trying to share her experience being a small landlord in Seattle. So I want you to listen to her story. I want you to listen to the reasonable way that she tries to share her story with the council. And then I want you to listen to the way activists reacted to her testimony at the end.
My name is Jennifer Leakish. I'm a past renter, current landlord, and a regular hardworking person. I own rental properties in Districts 3 and 7. Do the right thing and vote against rent control. This bill wants to peg rental increases to a cost of living increase of roughly 3%. But rental costs are pegged to the cost of expenses and not the cost of living. My property taxes increased by 21% last year, and backflow testing went from $55 to $70, which is a 27% increase. These are city-imposed fees. The problem is rising costs, which should be addressed. This bill also prevents property owners from reducing rental units in their properties. For example, if I rent a mother-in-law apartment in my house, then I have to rent the apartment indefinitely, which is a problem as I may want to have my single-family home without the apartment as my family grows or I have a lifestyle change. This bill is a bad idea. Please do not vote for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Leo.
So let that sink in for a moment. So here you have activists who show up, as they always do, and bogart public testimony. They do it and they're vicious and they yell at council members and they demand to get their way. They say, if you're sick of listening to us, just vote how we want you to vote. And then you have a couple small landlords sprinkled in, like this woman who says, I don't disagree that the cost of rent is high, but there's other costs associated with that. She said, I used to be a renter. I'm just a small time landlord who's renting out this unit in my home. And this is going to make it very difficult for me. And what happens? She gets booed. She shows up, takes time to share her story as a small landlord, is very reasonable and rational in the way that she does it, doesn't scream at the council members like the activist does, doesn't demand that they do exactly what she says that she wants them to do, and then she gets booed at the end. And that has been so indicative of essentially every debate that's been led by Councilwoman Kshama Sawant. That's how it goes. It's like children versus adults. And, in listening to that woman's story, I was also reminded, this whole subject of vilifying every single landlord in the city and lumping them in with big bad landlords. Our friend Jason Rands over at KTTH, he did a story the other day on this guy who says he's essentially lost his home that he bought in 2016. He's a machinist by trade, ends up buying this home in South Seattle in 2016, renting it out to a guy who never even made the first month's payment, tries to work with him on it, and then finds out that this guy who's never made a payment for rent is renting out his home on Airbnb. He's not even paying rent. Claims he's low income, so the city won't shut off the utilities as a way to try to get the guy out. And he's making money off this guy's home by renting it out on Airbnb, and the city won't do anything. That's the kind of stuff that landlords in Seattle are faced with. That is unreasonable. That is ridiculous. And the fact that you have people like Kshama Sawant and this, what I think is truly a small vocal group of activists who show up and make it seem like so many more people support rent control than actually do, and they want to vilify everyone, is just absurd. I'm very much looking forward to hopefully getting past that place as a city once Kshama Sawant leaves office. But here's what the message I want people to hear on this. So during all this testimony, you heard these activists who, again, are basically just doing what Kshama Sawant wants them to do. You heard them use this vote as a way to vilify Democrats, liberal Democrats, pro-labor Democrats, even the most progressive Democrats, like Teresa Mosqueda, who is an uber progressive on the Seattle City Council. She had to recuse herself from this vote because she had a scheduling conflict. They even attacked her for not being there.
Councilmember Mosqueda calls herself a progressive and a labor Democrat, and yet she could not bother to show up for a vote that is of so much consequence to working class people and poor people. Yeah, scheduling conflicts happen, but come on, all you needed to do was show up in Zoom for a few minutes for the vote. That's right. Mosqueda led the way in repealing the pandemic hazard pay for grocery workers, but she didn't even bother to show up to vote on our rent control law. Why should union members and working people support Mosqueda's election campaign if she won't speak in support of this bill and doesn't bother to show up to vote yes? And that goes for all of the council members that want to call themselves progressive or labor Democrats. Lewis, Herbold, Morales, we're watching your vote.
You sit here and twiddle your thumbs hiding behind a state ban when you know that this will put pressure on the state Democrats to lift the ban.
I don't see why this is so difficult for all of the Democrats who claim to be here for labor, yet obviously are here for those who are oppressing the rest of us.
These are families with parents working full-time jobs who cannot put a roof over their children's heads. And it is because of corporate greed being allowed to run this city and the lack of response from Democrats here on city council and at the state level.
If city council Democrats vote no on Councilmember Sawant's strong rent control legislation, they will have made it clear that the Democratic Party is on the side of greedy multimillionaires and billionaire real estate barons.
If council Democrats vote no on Sawant's strong rent control, they have made it clear that they are on the side of greedy landlords who are allegedly price fixing and not on the side of working families trying to keep a roof over their heads.
Yeah. So if you are not with us 100% of the time, you are against us. you are, in the words of Shama Sawant, just as bad as Republicans. And that messaging, and you heard even in those individual clips of testimony that some of it sounded exactly the same, because they're just basically reading off a script that Shama Sawant gives them. Here's a little bit of a clip of Shama Sawant, talking about that same theme about Democrats on the council.
If I was giving a grade to the Democratic Party for standing up for working people and the poor, what grade would we give them? Enough. Absolutely.
Enough. Here's the thing, and here is the takeaway message from all of this. For reasonable Democrats in the city of Seattle, liberal Democrats, progressive Democrats, you are never going to be enough for that group of activists. You are never going to do enough for them. You can be as progressive as you want to be. I mean, they even vilified Teresa Mosqueda, suggesting, well, why would we support her when she didn't show up for us on this one issue? Kowtowing to the fringe activists that for so long in Seattle have had this outsized voice at City Hall is a fruitless endeavor. The second you step out of line, they vilify you, they attack you, they scream at you. You are never going to be enough for them. If that's not an indication that you should stop trying to ingratiate yourselves to the farthest left fringe of Seattle, I don't know what else is. Instead of hopelessly, time and time again, trying to do what these activists want you to do, who are never going to like you anyway, who are never going to support you anyway, why not try catering to people in the middle, to reasonable people like that landlord who spoke and said, look, I used to be a renter. I'm a small landlord. I'm just trying to get by. Why not cater to them? Why not cater to the people who don't show up at council chambers and scream at you and demand that you do exactly what they tell you to do? Catering to the fringe in Seattle has done nothing for you. So it's time to try a different approach. That segment was brought to you by our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action today at future42.org. All right, the Stop the Sweeps crowd in Seattle, which again is a fringe activist group that is opposed to basically any sweep of homeless encampment, has taken things to a new low. Let's discuss it in our segment, Unbelievable. Okay, we've been tracking developments on a massive homeless encampment fire that happened in a green belt that is between I-5 and Harborview Medical Center in downtown Seattle. And this thing was just a freaking inferno. And thankfully no one was killed, but it could have had, disastrous consequences, not only for the people who were in the camp, but for the nearby hospital, for I-5, etc. So the fire happened, and pretty soon there were rumors that this was an intentional fire and that it might have been started in relation to an ongoing drug turf war. That was confirmed by multiple outlets, including our friend Jonathan Cho and Como News, who said that it was retaliation, that they suspected that the arson was caused by retaliation at this now former homeless encampment. Because after the fire happened, after it became clear that these were like homemade IEDs set off to intentionally cause fire to this area because somebody had a drug beef, thank God that's apparently what led to the final straw for the city of Seattle telling WashDOT, because it's on state property, hey, we're going in, we're going to clear this thing. It's obviously an imminent public safety threat, which is obvious, right? So then I couldn't help but notice, because I follow the group Stop the Sweep Seattle on Instagram, because apparently I'm just a glutton for punishment. They sent out this, and they often, so basically what they use their social media accounts for is, one, to raise money for the difficult work they're doing of trying to stop sweeps across the city. I mean, people call me a grift, that's a grift. But they also will post the location of sweeps that are happening so activists can show up and protest or try to stop the sweeps from happening. So they posted, I kid you not, unbelievable, a picture of this burnt up former homeless encampment on the side of the interstate. And they wrote this, brace yourselves. After being devastated by a fire, this camp was given 12 hours notice before being swept. The Tree Line Camp has existed since 2020 and was considered a stable, safe place to move, especially after being swept from city land. WashDOT, Seattle Parks and Rec workers, SPD, and a private contractor conducted this sweep over 2 days. And they go on in their post to talk about how they don't agree with it, how they don't think that sweeps like this should happen. The fact that they put in here that this was considered a stable, safe place to move is unhinged. It was set fire by an improvised explosive device because of a drug turf war. And those are the kinds of places that you think homeless individuals, vulnerable individuals should be allowed to stay? Those are the kinds of places that you don't think that police in the city should come in and move people out of? I would simply ask, what is wrong with you? Are you that ideologically driven that you cannot look at least this one example, at least this one instance and say, yeah, maybe people shouldn't be living there in tents? Because what you claim to care about are the people living on the streets. You claim to be the ones that are compassionate, that care about improving their circumstances. Yet you want to keep them in an encampment that has been a problem for some time and where there's a drug turf war that has escalated to the point of arson. Explain to me how that's compassionate. Explain to me how that's showing care and concern for the people living there. No, what's really going on here, and it ties back to the last story we discussed on rent control. These activists want to keep people living in encampments. These people want there to be as much visible homelessness as possible. Why? Because that makes it more likely that politicians who can be easily convinced by an activist mob will support policies like rent control. You have to vote for this policy. Look at how many homeless people are living in our community. Look at how many homeless people are living along I-5. If you don't support rent control, then you're a terrible person, beholden to the rich. This is all part of the same grift of these activists who say they care so much about the homeless that they want to leave them in an encampment where they might be burned alive if it means that that could convince the city to pass the sort of far-left policies that they believe in. It is simply freaking unbelievable. All right, coming up next, we will get to the Trump indictment, Nicole's favorite topic of the day. We'll also have a conversation about how Nicole and I can't stop debating whether to put Trump stories on the podcast. But first, we've been talking about our friend Wes Jones with sellwithwes.com. If you're even thinking about selling your home, visit sellwithwes.com. They have a little a home value calculator you can use to see how much your home is worth. It might be worth more than you think, and then you can take the next steps from there. But Sell with Wes and Wes Jones and Associates have some really cool things they offer that you're not going to see with other real estate agents, including something called their Listing Boost Concierge Service. If you need to sell your home, but you know it needs some updates in order to get the best possible price, Wes and his team can help you out.
So we're going to come in, number one, and we're going to inspect a home, do a pre-inspection. We're going to find out all those little hidden bugs that, a buyer may be concerned with. And if a seller wants to do some cosmetic updates, whether it's flooring, whether it's lighting, countertops, even a kitchen, we're going to help guide them through that. So the Listing Boost Concierge Service, what we can do is we can project manage those rehab projects. We have a list of contractors and preferred vendors that we like to work with and have a ton of experience with, and we'll take that off a seller's hands. We'll go ahead and run that project for them, and we even have some options where they can pay at closing out of their net proceeds.
Yeah, and you should actually check out my social media pages today because we just posted this success story of Susan in Federal Way. She'd first heard about Sell with Wes when he was advertising on the Dory Monson show, and she ended up having an awesome experience with the Listing Boost Concierge Service, so I just posted a little interview with her if you want to check it out. But visit sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, and start by simply using their home value calculator to see how much your home might be worth. It could be worth more than you think. Sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. Okay, let's dip outside of Washington State, but first, Nicole, come on. Come here.
Okay.
Summoned.
I'm here.
We have endless debates about Trump stories.
We do.
Nicole does not want them on the podcast.
I just want them few and far between.
We do few and far
Very
between.
few. Well, so every time there's a little indictment, we throw it in here.
I've got to read. I got this text from. I'm not going to. Oh, my phone's dead. That's shocking. My phone's always dead.
That's the least shocking thing of the day.
Yeah, least shocking thing of the day. From a friend who's a hardcore Democrat who said, oh my God, Trump got indicted again. This is so exhausting. Just like over it. So here's the thing. I can't ignore that the former president, who's the front runner for the GOP nomination in 2024, just got indicted related to January 6th. I can't ignore it.
I don't think that we're ignoring it.
Well, if we didn't talk about it, we'd be ignoring it.
Well, the show's purpose, we have to ignore a lot of stories because they don't fit into our show's purpose.
Correct.
So sometimes, like another Trump indictment, I'm not sure. That's division to me.
Yeah, but it fits exactly in because we talk about ways to reject false narratives that are meant to divide us. Now, I don't think the Trump indictment is a false narrative per se. However, I think everything around Trump is a result of the media's efforts to divide us. So what I really before I get to the Trump indictment, my whole thing on Donald Trump is, I think he was a creation of the media. When Trump first launched his campaign in 2015 or 2014, whichever it was, he got endless attention that other candidates did not receive because he was out there. He'd say wild things at his rallies.
Do you think it's because he was out there or because he's a character? He was a famous person that was a character previously,
it was
so he was
ratings.
The most interesting.
That's what I mean by out there.
Yes.
It was for ratings. They would air every rally he did wall to wall, and even CNN in hindsight has admitted that was a mistake. But that was endless free airtime for Donald Trump.
Agreed.
And then when the media realized, we're like giving this guy a lot of attention and we're helping his campaign, then they went unhinged. And then they went total bat, you know what?
Yep.
And that unhinged hatred of him to combat the monster that they created, that is what led so many Americans to love him. So to me, the media is the reason Trump was elected in the first place.
I don't think that that's why people love him, but okay.
I do. I think
all the rest of that I agree with, but I don't think that's why. I think the people that loved him before all that. It's a policy thing. I think that, yes, some people got more
loyal
maybe, or more vocal about how much they appreciate Trump. I think that it, gets people all riled up, but I think that the policies and things that he did, a lot of people love.
But I'm talking before he was even elected. Because he didn't do anything meaningful for the country until he was in office. And I don't disagree that the economy and other aspects.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is what got him to that point to be put in that position? I think it was the media giving him way more attention than other candidates and then going completely unhinged when he started to do well. And then people who don't trust the media saw that and they're like, well, now I'm digging in. Now that's my guy from now until the end of freaking time. So I do think that these Trump stories fit perfectly into the theme of the show, which is trying to cover them in a way that isn't unhinged and that recognizes that some of that, the false divides that the media pushed on us related to Donald Trump is responsible for his success. I really believe that. But anyway, into the indictment story. I think January 6th was an incredible embarrassment for our country. I take it very seriously. I always have. I never voted for Trump. But this is getting to the point of absurdity. I mean, we're past the point of absurdity.
It's still embarrassing. Why are we still talking about it?
We're past the point of absurdity in this, in that I just don't think that this path is the best thing for the country. I don't think anyone should be above the law, but at this point, when you've had so many cases against him that have fallen apart, impeachments that have fallen apart, I just don't know what good it's going to do at this point. And I hate to say that because I'm a law and order person. I want people held accountable for their actions. But when you talk about the good of the country, I just don't see it here. And we'll get to, this has benefited Trump. It's only benefited him. And so let me just get to the details of the story. And I'm very curious to hear you guys' thoughts on this. But Forbes says Trump indicted, ex-president charged with these crimes in DOJ January 6th probe, and they could all include prison time. It says he was charged with 4 federal crimes, including conspiracy to defraud, obstruction, and conspiracy of rights, which again could land the former president in prison. Here is special counsel Jack Smith.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it It was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election.
Yeah. So Mike Pence put out a comment about this. And look, I also feel very bad for Mike Pence for what happened on January 6th. I mean, the little hang Mike Pence chants, the fact that Trump just left him just in the Capitol with an angry mob outside that hated him. So I feel bad for Pence, and Pence has every right to comment on this. He said, today's indictment serves as an important reminder. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. I mean, he's also running to be president of the United States, so he would, of course, say that. But then he says, our country is more important than one man. Our Constitution is more important than any one man's career, which I agree. He said on January 6th, former President Trump demanded that I choose between him and the Constitution. I chose the Constitution, and I always will. So a couple things will give Donald Trump a chance to respond here. So he released a formal statement from the campaign. I'll read that for you. He said, this is nothing more than the latest corrupt chapter in the continued pathetic attempt by the Biden crime family and their weaponized Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 presidential election, in which President Trump is the undisputed frontrunner and leading by a substantial margin. But why did they wait 2.5 years to bring these fake charges right in the middle of President Trump's winning campaign for 2024? Why was it announced the day after the big crooked Joe Biden scandal broke out from the halls of Congress? The answer is election interference. The lawlessness of these persecutions of President Trump and his supporters is reminiscent of Nazi Germany. Oh, God, in the 1930s. What have I said about Nazi comparisons? He said the former Soviet Union and the other authoritarian dictatorial regimes. Okay, we'll stop it there. Nazi comparisons. Of course, there'd be a Nazi comparison in that. But then he posted on Truth Social, and he said, thank you to everyone. I've never had so much support on anything before. And that is, I think, one of the cruxes of it is, people who hope that these indictments are somehow going to undercut, Donald Trump and his support. He's raking in more cash than he ever has. And every time there's something like this, people are going to donate like wildfire to his campaign. Now, if for some reason this indictment led to a conviction and prison time, then yeah, that would obviously potentially disrupt his ability to actually serve as president, even if people wanted to elect him in 2024. And so I think that's a bridge you cross when it comes. But for the time being, he's lapping this up. I mean, he's been able to kind of navigate around all the things that they've thrown at him, and now he's raking in more money before. A lot of that goes to his legal fees. So the whole thing is just a mess, and it's frankly exhausting. It's divisive, but I'm torn on it. I know you don't like it, but I'm torn on it because, again, I'm law and order. How can I sit here and rail every single day against people committing low-level crimes, mid-level crimes, high crimes, wanting them to be held accountable for their actions? Now, I don't know if the case against Trump is legally sound. I don't know if they can prove what they're trying to prove on a legal basis and secure conviction. At the same time, I think that what he did was wrong. I don't think that he should be president again. So I have this real, internal struggle between saying, oh, don't continue to investigate these things, and sort of my position on it all. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's not that I think anybody's above the law in this sense or any other sense. I also think that Biden's not above the law.
Correct.
And there are some things that need to be investigated there as well. I guess it's the chaos that it creates by them coming out and continuing this. Here's an indictment. Oh, that didn't work. Here, I'll try another one. Here, I'll try another one. And there's a timeline issue, right? So if these were all things that he did wrong 2 years, 3 years ago, then why are we just now hearing about him? Why is it because you're freaking out? You don't want him to run for president. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's throw this at him.
Yeah.
Let's throw this at him. And I just think that the media chaos that it creates, the way that they're doing it is the problem here.
Well, yeah, and I think that you do, if you're a government prosecutor in the DOJ,
Yes.
I think you always have to have that battle between, okay, what's best for justice and what's best for the country.
Correct.
And you do have, prosecutorial judgment is a thing for a reason. As a prosecutor, you get to decide, is this a case that we should bring or is it not? You don't have to bring every case where you suspect a crime has been committed. And so I think that's a question too, is this in the best interest of the country in our ability to move forward past something that happened now almost 3 years ago.
Right. And I guess as far as our coverage of it, I just think we have the same perspective every time we hear a story.
Yeah.
So that's where my coverage that's where my argument lies.
Right. It's like,
is
what
do we
else
say
would
the
you say
same
about
thing
Donald
every
Trump?
time? Like, do we have something new to say about it, or are we just telling people it happened and everybody sees it everywhere they go?
Yeah,
right
and then
now?
complaining about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the journalist in me still, like that's used to doing
Mhm.
straightforward news, where it's like, I can't just ignore it. And then
Right.
I feel like, well, why am I ignoring that when I wouldn't ignore it if it was, so-and-so. So that's, and I'm fine like hashing this internal struggle out with you
Mhm.
guys live on the show, because I really do battle with it. I really do battle between my dislike for him as a politician and as a person and my dislike for endless indictments and endless criminal investigations that are dividing the country and only lining his pockets. I struggle so much with it on a daily basis doing this show.
I know you do. But
Anyway.
I also worry about the future of candidates like him, such as DeSantis, right? So I see DeSantis being destroyed every day. And of course there is something, that is his fault, I'm sure, in that. I also think that he's just vilified.
Right.
And that's going to continue to be a problem. Every single candidate that shows any leg up in the race as a Republican.
Republican,
And it is scary the way that that's just being allowed and perpetuated.
Yeah, and like, how do you end that? How do you end the constant media vilification of anyone who dares to be a Republican?
Right.
And so it's just the point of absurdity, and that's
Yep.
why you should just ditch the mainstream media and subscribe to Undivided.
That's right.
Okay, let's do a funner national story.
Okay.
So down in Oregon, voters, was this voted on?
Yes, it's just going into effect.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, it was a House Bill 2426, recently passed in Oregon. So Oregonians are now going to have the option to fill their own gas tanks. Wow. Hashtag blessed. Ready, Set, Pump Oregon self-serve gas stations go into effect Friday. That's from That Oregon Life, so I just included this because I have this hilarious story about back in the day, way back, when I was working as a reporter for Cairo Radio. I was down in Oregon doing a story, and I was in my Cairo Radio news car. So it had like emblazoned with Cairo News Radio on the side. So I had never been to Oregon before. That was my first time across the border. I was just outside of Portland, and I roll up, and I'm kind of sitting there for a second. I don't know what, I was on my phone or something at the gas pump. And all of a sudden this guy's creeping up from the side here. He's like, and I'm like thinking, okay, here's some guy who wants to talk to me because I'm a news lady. But he was being really weird about it, like kind of standing back. And like, I was like, so I roll my window down this much. I'm like, can I help you? And he goes, yeah, I'm going to pump your gas. I'm like, no, thanks. Now I'm thinking it's some homeless guy who wants to offer to pump my gas for a couple bucks. I'm like, no, I got it. He's like, no, like I'm going to pump your gas. And I'm freaked out. I'm like going to call 911. Like, no, go away, dude. I need to pump my gas. And he's like, no, in Oregon, you're not allowed to pump your own gas. And I was like, oh gosh, okay. And I thought that was so weird.
Yes. I mean, it's weird. I'm kind of bummed about it
Why?
because I thought that was something special in Oregon, and it made me love Oregon a little bit that you still have this old, doesn't it take you back to like the 50s?
I never remember pumping my,
when
well,
there
I wasn't
were gas
alive.
attendants to
I wasn't
help you.
alive in the 50s, so no, it doesn't take me back to the 50s.
Well, it kind of takes me back to that. There on boats, you also usually don't pump your gas. They always have boat gas attendants, and I just kind of love that little extra service. Now I mean, you have the choice. I'm sure they're not going to phase it out immediately, and they'll have the choice. But of course, it's just going to go away, and I just think it's another little thing from the past that we're losing.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some young Oregonians who are like,
jobs.
They're
losing their jobs.
How do I do this? There's a lot of Oregonians who are going to have to be taught by their parents how to pump gas. But I wonder how much jobs actually had something to do with it, because we know a lot of service industries are really struggling to find people to work. I mean, there's, we go to restaurants and stuff where they're like, you see so many empty tables and they're not seating anyone else because they just don't have the staff.
Right.
And so I wonder if that had something to do with it. Is like, if you don't have enough people to pump the gas regularly, then how can you have that be a law that you have to have them pump the gas? Because then you're relying on the private sector to staff enough jobs in that area to make the law possible. So I don't know. But anyway, So now next time I go, this is funny because there's a picture. Can you go back to that article quick?
Yes. Well,
Do you see something wrong with this picture?
I'm getting to it.
Hold on. I think this is one of those Oregonians who've never pumped their own gas. If you're just listening on the podcast, they've got the nozzle like a foot away from the car, and it looks like
With
they're just
gas coming
pouring
out.
gas out on their car. So, maybe that's not a good idea after all. So, good luck to our friends in Oregon. You're going to need it. All right, coming up next to your questions and comments from the live stream. We got some super chats today. Nice. But first, I've been talking about Eastside Weight Loss Clinic, eastsideweightlosclinic.com. I'm down 36 pounds, and in fact, you might see I'm not wearing my engagement ring today. It's because I lost so much weight, I had to drop it off to be resized. Went from a size 7 ring to a size 6. They're like, wow. They're like, did he just surprise you with it? And so it didn't fit and he didn't know what size to get? I'm like, oh no, it fit. Now it almost falls off. So I had one of those little adjusters on it to keep it on. And I hadn't got it resized earlier because I was like, well, maybe, as I lose more weight. And so I'm like, okay, now I'm a month out from the wedding and they have to make the wedding band to fit it. So it's like now I am forced to get it resized. Anyway, so that's how much weight I lost, is my fingers are much skinnier now. So if you'd like to try the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan, you can try it from anywhere, by the way. You can do the whole thing virtually. You never have to go to an office if you don't want to. Just schedule a free 15-minute consultation at eastsideweightlosclinic.com. eastsideweightlosclinic.com. Okay, let's get to questions and comments. We've got some super chat. Bill Biz with the super chat. He's like our sugar daddy. He's our YouTube sugar
Kind of
daddy.
is.
Brandi, I was listening to Ron Dotzauer on Como. He thought voter turnout in the general might be more than double the primary. If true, that might be a cause for optimism in some of the closer commission races. Yeah, I mean, turnout's always much better in the general election. And so it's hard to read too terribly much into primary results. But again, in primaries, it tends to be people who just like have a really, really strong opinion for or against one particular candidate. But you still, as an incumbent, you don't want to emerge from the primary under 50%. That's never a good sign. Okay, super chat from Justin LD. Love you guys. You gave us a super chat just to say you love us. That's so nice.
So sweet.
That's so nice. Oh, and a second super chat from Justin saying, if you ever run for anything, you have my vote. Thank you. What should I run for, Nicole? I've internally struggled with, I've wanted to run for office, but then I'm like, man, we're having a lot of fun.
Oh, I know. I don't want you to run anytime soon.
You'd be out of a job.
I'd be out of the job.
No, somebody would scoop you up. Well, work for my campaign.
I was going to say, wouldn't you want me to still work with you? but I also think that there's well, I feel like right now at this time in society, you have to pick a party.
That's my issue. I'd never run with a party.
Yeah.
It would go against everything I stand for.
Right. So I'm not sure that it's the time until that's a possibility.
Maybe one day, many moons from now. Okay, Vicky said, I think the entire show today should be called Unbelievable. Sometimes I think that almost every day. Wow, this could be one big unbelievable segment. On the election and voting, Matthew Cook says, I'm sorry, but it's pathetic that with this low of a turnout that King County can't have the majority of ballots counted. Well, I kind of disagree with that because you can turn them in up to 8 p.m. on election night. So you do have, the first drop of ballots that you typically get are, the first drop of ballots that you typically get at 8 p.m. are people who have turned them in early. So they're already counted, basically. They're just sitting there waiting for that release, and then they usually update it once the next day around 4 p.m., and then you'll have people who voted later. So it won't take very long for them to count. I mean, during the general election, when you have a ton of ballots, it takes weeks sometimes to get final results. Cameron says, of course, what else would we expect but more blatant anti-Caucasian racism? In reference to the Seattle mayor's office saying, we need to show fewer white people and fewer people with a military bearing in our recruitment material for SPD. Bob says, I know many people like mail-in voting, but participation has gotten worse since back when it was an event and you had to go to vote in person. It's too easy to just leave your ballot on the counter. Yeah, I'm of two minds of that. I guess I don't know. I'd have to look back at what turnout was like pre-mail-in voting, but I really like mail-in voting. I don't think you could ever convince me to want to go back to voting in a line.
I like it as a voter, not as a results person.
Do you really think that mail-in voting?
I think it changes outcomes of elections, not because of
fraud,
fraud behind the scenes necessarily, but because I do think it's a different kind of motivation, right? So you go, like, you have a big election day, everybody, you see people going to elections, you get little stickers, like there's more, there's just more excitement around it, right? Like, let's be American today. Where now I do agree with Bob is that ballots get left in places.
Yes.
They arrive a month before and they get left all over the place. And then it gets closer to election day and you're like, where's that ballot? And then you're like, too late to request a new one. I'm out.
Yeah, I don't think that it makes it more difficult or less likely that someone's going to vote.
Obviously less difficult.
Yes.
But it also, I do think it opens the door to a lot of fraud.
Oh, 100%. Opportunity for fraud is a big issue. Actual fraud is less of a big issue. But there's a lot of opportunity for fraud.
Any
you want to
fraud
close
is an
those.
issue.
Well, of course, but it's not changing the results of presidential elections.
You don't know. I mean, it could in the future. You don't know.
Oh, man, I hired a conspiracist for my producer. I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying.
Keely Kolani? Did I say that right? Keely Kolani. I have asked several young people of voting age, why are you voting? I usually get, okay, hold on. I have asked several young people of voting age, are you voting? I usually get, no, my vote won't matter. It's sad because if all the single votes would vote, it would make the difference. Yeah, I mean, I like I said earlier, I'd like to see what the results would be in Seattle if every single registered voter actually voted.
I'm not sure that young is the solution because I'm not sure young is getting educated, but definitely all should be voting.
Yeah.
And I think education is actually the most important part of the election process is people need to actually educate themselves, not vote for the most famous like Trump, not vote for the most obnoxious like Sawant. They need to get educated on topics and what affects their lives.
Yes, agree.
That's the problem.
Neelan Johnson said, there is no excuse for not voting if you're healthy. All mail voting should have hitting at least 70% turnout regardless of the year. Too many people are just lazy and want to complain. At some point, you should lose your right to vote if you don't use it. On police officers and not using white officers in as much recruitment material, Devlin said, this may sound crazy, but maybe a group of bureaucrats doesn't know jack about it, what it means to be a police officer or what kind of personality it takes to do the job. Yeah, there's a reason people who used to serve in the military are more likely to be police officers. And that's a very difficult job to do. Not everyone has the temperament, not everyone has the mindset and the mental fortitude to do what they do and to see what they see on a daily basis. On landlords just being screwed over left and right by the city of Seattle, Jill said, big landlords from Wall Street will control all rentals before long. That will not be a good thing at all. And I agree. And I think you're saying what I'm saying, which is if you scare all the mom and pops away, then you're going to do the exact opposite. Yep. So they're saying, it's all big bad landlords. Well, it's going to be if you continue on this trajectory, and that will be even worse. Heidi said the city allowed foreign investors to build all these big apartments. Sharon said, oh my God, the sounds of entitled, bratty new generation of whiny Dems. Jeez. And they were the one chick at the beginning, hi, my name's Kat. As someone who has to pay rent every month, I'm like, join. So I was over here just laughing, pulling that audio. I was like, wow, join the real world. Naomi says, that's exactly what I always say. You will never be liberal enough. They did this to Amazon as well, biting the hand that feeds you, shooting themselves in the foot, 100%. And I've chastised Amazon before trying to be a woke company. It's like, they vilify you. There's nothing you can do. There is no benefit you can bring to this city that they will not vilify you for.
I think that's why
stop trying to cater to them.
Yeah. That's why we are where we are. It has escalated to this point because of the catering.
Yes. 100%. Okay, let's get through a couple more. We're over time today, but we have so many good comments. Let me see. On Trump, Liz says, I don't like Trump's character, but I love his policies, which is something I get. And that's part of the internal struggle, right? I think there's a lot of people who do not like him as a person, who would like to find someone who would support the policies he'd support without all the Trumpism that comes along with it.
Which you and I have been learning more about presidents of the past. And when there was no social media, we didn't know presidents well enough to be this annoyed by their behavior and
Yes.
their personality. And I think that that's where the emphasis has changed in these days and times, because now that's all the emphasis is personality and behavior, where in the days of like JFK, not so much. It was all policy. And so you just voted on policy.
Right.
But
I agree.
Not
I
so
think
much
that's,
anymore.
I think that is very true. Jennifer says, girl, I wore your shirt to Costco, our undivided t-shirts.
Love it.
And Aaron's yesterday, I got so many compliments. I'm telling them it came from my favorite podcaster and told them about your show. I actually had a woman around our age, when I mentioned it, said that she listens and loves you and cannot wait for the online store. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, probably mid-August, we'll have the online store up and running. Let's read one on gas in Oregon. John said, communist Oregon, creating jobs for no reason, just to make sure the government can take care of its people. Yeah, very true. Okay, let's really quickly, since we're over time, get to a brief closing sanity check. If you keep voting for the same people, you're going to get the same results. And that is my sanity check for the people of Seattle. We have a couple months from now until the November election, where I hope everybody takes a deep breath and really thinks about whether any incumbents on the Seattle City Council deserve to keep their jobs. I would also say, in addition to voting for the same people and getting the same results, if we do not show some of these politicians that there are consequences for their actions, then that will lead to disastrous results. Someone like Andrew Lewis, who ran for his job saying he wanted to hire more officers, turned around 6 months later, pledged to defund the police by 50%, turned around 6 months after that and pretended that none of it ever happened, and then sent out campaign mailers saying that he was leading the way on public safety. If there are no consequences for someone like Andrew Lewis, then politicians in Seattle and in Washington State will believe that they can do anything, that they can flip-flop as many times as their heart desires, and they will always keep their jobs. And that is a very bad precedent to set. So I would encourage Seattle voters to check their level of sanity, to ask themselves, what do I want out of city government? What do I want out of public servants? And what do I want the city to become? And that has been your sanity check for today. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Coming up on the show tomorrow, we'll have an edition of Florida Report with my sister. Also, a Democratic political strategist is going to join us to offer his take on what happened in Tuesday's primary. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. Thank you for listening to my endless rant about not knowing how to cover former President Donald Trump. If you would like to become an Undivided subscriber, you can sign up for just $5 a month. undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com. We'll see you back on the show tomorrow at noon.